Well, welcome to the Mandarin, and today we're looking at the issue of council amalgamations with Maddocks planning partner and team leader Prue Burns and senior associate Todd Neal. Prue is a recognised expert in the local government area, and we want to explore with Prue what council chief executives should be considering as they contemplate mergers and amalgamations. And with Todd, we're looking at the area of services and shared services. Amalgamations are very much on the agenda in Australia, in Western Australia, South Australia, and in particular New South Wales, where there's a very comprehensive scheme being managed by the New South Wales Office of Local Government called the Fit for the Future program. Prue, perhaps we could start with yourself. Looking at the New South Wales program, could you summarise how you see councils approaching the general amalgamation issue?
Thanks, Tom. Yes, in speaking with those in the industry, it's clear to us that councils have taken up the challenge to self-assess and determine the best pathway forward for their local government area. It's a huge undertaking with a firm deadline, and a significant amount of effort is being expended at the moment to ensure that councils have the relevant information they need to make that decision.
So thinking about the issue then, for general managers, they've often got a lot on their plate. If you could try and summarise, what are the top line issues that general managers need to consider as they look at this whole area of amalgamations and mergers?
Well, there are a huge number of issues for them to tackle. I think predominantly boils down to around 7. The needs of the community and stakeholders is one of the key issues. There are also human resource and cultural integration issues to consider. The legislative requirements that councils have to comply with in following any one of these pathways. Financial integration and asset management are also very important. Investment in technology and innovation, as well as finally strategic planning.
Okay, so let's look at those in order. Can we focus on the needs of the community? What are the issues focused in there?
Well, one of the key things for council to consider in determining their pathway forward is to ensure they have a very well constructed communications plan. Consultation with the community from past experience is something that will either make or break this process, and it's very important that the council understand what the community's needs and concerns might be. Service delivery is also a really important matter for the community, and in our experience it's something that councils would need to consider what their current service delivery requirements are and what any merged entity would require in terms of delivering service to the community.
Right. You mentioned legislative requirements. I'm going to assume there's quite a few of them. What's the summary there?
Well, it's a very broad area for general managers to come to terms with. In New South Wales, there's a huge suite of legislative requirements for council to comply with, from the Local Government Act through to the Industrial Relations Act, and many more in between.
Right, so ring your lawyer.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. Looking at the financial integration issue, which is probably the most key important one ultimately on this area, what are some of the aspects that general managers need to think about on financial integration?
Well, I think as a starting point, the council should be considering their long-term financial plans. That'll set the groundwork for the financial modelling and projections that they'll need to consider in terms of working out how financially secure their council is and what their pathway forward is with any merger proposal.
Asset management would also be an issue?
Absolutely. So councils obviously hold many assets and it's important that the general manager be aware of what their current maintenance requirements are, because that can influence costing and investment decisions for the future.
And an equally important aspect would be asset management?
Yes, so council needs to be aware of its current stock of assets and what its maintenance obligations are in relation to those. Engagement with the community in relation to its expectations about the standard and maintenance of its assets is also very important and will inform the general manager's decision making in relation to investment in that area.
And talking of asset management, one of the most important asset systems, obviously the technology and communication systems. What's your advice there?
Well, integrating the tech systems of any two organisations is going to throw up a range of issues. General managers will likely be aware of the need to deliver technology in a seamless way, and what that means is they'll need to look at issues around whether there's a requirement to upskill staff, whether there's a requirement to invest in new technology, whether the newly merged council would require satellite offices, for example, and how well both the existing councils and the new entity might take up remote access technology, for example, and the delivery of online services.
Right. Obviously, human resources and employment and cultural issues loom very large for general managers. What's your advice to general managers in this sector?
This is one of the biggest challenges for general managers contemplating a merger. We're looking at two organisations becoming one, and that will throw up a large range of human resource challenges.
Right. And in terms about capabilities, skill shortages, what sort of areas is that an issue?
Yes, so many councils face skill shortages in particular areas, and it'll be important for councils to consider one another's challenges that they face in relation to skills shortages and whether there are any synergies there between the councils proposing to merge.
Right. And when councils do merge, obviously there's a relook at resourcing and personnel issues. Employment laws must loom large.
It does. It's one thing we find councils struggle with and require advice on more often in these scenarios than any other areas of law.
Right, and a good insight around awards and enterprise agreements?
That's right. So again, in contemplating a merger, council will obviously need to understand its contractual obligations, its obligations under any applicable awards, and localised industrial arrangements and council agreements.
And finally, let's look at the strategic planning issues. What's behind that?
So merging councils are likely to face a number of issues in relation to their strategic planning. When you're combining two organisations and two geographic locations, you're looking at combining areas that have variations in demographics, areas that have variations in environmental and economic challenges.
Todd, another issue obviously on the agenda is the whole area of shared resources and services. What advice do you have for general managers in that space?
Yeah, there's really an element here of there being nothing new under the sun. We've been advising councils over the years on joint servicing arrangements such as regional organisations of councils, alliances, clusters. There's a whole range of them which have come up from time to time. Indeed, the Local Government Act in both its current form and the previous 1919 version of the Act, they both contemplate joint servicing arrangements across different councils in the form of what's known as county councils. So we've got some corporate memory that we've developed over time, and we really understand the issues that plague councils as they enter into these relationships. If there are two lessons, I guess, that we've learnt over the course of advising these councils on entering these arrangements, there's the first one, which is that the relationship between the councils needs to be clear. It's really important that there be binding, enforceable relationships between the councils. On the other hand, if there's a loosely drafted memorandum of understanding which is prepared, it allows the councils to cherry pick the extent of their involvement to the detriment of the broader collective purpose.
Right, so really make sure it's quite watertight, very precise what people are going to get out, and make sure everyone's obviously engaged and signed up for that particular proposition.
That's right, yeah.
Right. And you mentioned a second lesson?
Yeah, there's a second lesson, and it's that the governance organs of the joint organisation need to be well thought out and clearly established as well. So it's very important that these governance organisations take into account the Local Government Act. The Local Government Act is broadly acknowledged to be an act of permission rather than prescription, yet it also contains restrictions on what local government can and can't do. For example, the acceptance of tenders, who may be delegated authority. It also contains protections for council employees, for example. And there's a careful balancing exercise that needs to take place here as to the efficiency in which decisions are made and the governance organs administering those decisions.
Right. Thanks very much, Todd and Prue. Amalgamation and mergers are very much live issues, and that's been a very useful summary for general managers and chief executives. For more information on these issues, you can visit Maddocks at their website, maddocks.com.au, or you can contact Prue or Todd through their Maddocks office, either in Melbourne, Canberra or Sydney. Thank you very much.